Hey guys, Justin here. We are hopping into a new series on the book of Jonah, and I'm super excited about this series because Jonah is one of those stories, one of these books in the Bible that we just know lots about in our head, but maybe we haven't really gone to reading it and looking at it in great detail. When we think about Jonah, we learn a lot about it from pop culture and media, or even the VeggieTales. And we kind of got to get past the VeggieTales factor where this story is just about this guy who goes onto a pirate ship and gets eaten by a whale or whatever, and he's barfed out a few days later and it's gross. We got to get past the fact because most of us, when we think of Jonah, all we think about is this dude getting eaten by a whale, and that's kind of it. We have to get past that because the book of Jonah is much, much deeper than that. There's a lot more going on in this story, and I think there is a bit of Jonah in all of us. There's a bit of Jonah in me, there's a bit of Jonah in you, and this story is going to begin to critique the worst parts of all of us. The parts of us that are selfish, the parts of us that are judgmental, the parts of us that are apathetic, the parts of us that think that we are always right and maybe God is wrong or other people are wrong, the parts of us where the things we say and the things we do don't quite line up. The book of Jonah is going to critique all of that. It's going to kind of slap you in the face a little bit. So let's hop into it. Jonah chapter 1, we'll read the first 3 verses to start off. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Now, right off the top here, God asks Jonah to do something. And what does Jonah do? He does the exact opposite. I remember a few years ago, me and 2 other youth leaders, we are driving out to youth and we're going in this cool minivan. I'm not going to say who the leaders are, but you know who you are. We're in this minivan. We're supposed to go to youth together. It's an 8-minute drive. All we got to do is turn right and head down this road and we'll be at youth. But instead of turning right, we start going left. And I remember sitting in the backseat of this minivan thinking to myself, where are we going? Are we going to youth, or we're going in the wrong direction? What's up? But I thought in my head, maybe we're going to go pick up something or get gas or whatever. So I didn't question it. But we keep driving, and we're just having natural conversations. And me and the other passenger, we kind of look at each other we're both a little confused, but we're still not saying anything because it's kind of funny. But we're far away now and we're heading in the wrong direction to the point where we are almost out of the city. We see the bridge is coming up and we need to, so we're dude, where are we going? And it's at that moment that he realizes we are heading in the exact wrong direction. So we're turning this minivan and doing crazy stuff because we're heading in the wrong direction. We are heading across the bridge. We're heading out of the city. And for Jonah, he is not just heading away from a city. He is heading to the opposite end of the earth. Nineveh is this city out in the east. And Tarshish, the place where Jonah starts heading, this is the furthest possible city out to the west. And in ancient times, Tarshish was the farthest place you could go. To them, in their minds, this was the end of the world. This is as far as the map would go, right? So he is told to go east, and he goes as far away possible to the west. And one of the funny things about the book of Jonah and all this, it's written in a different language, obviously, but the word Jonah, his name, in the original language, this word means dove, like the bird, like a dove. And he's the son of Amittai. And Amittai in the original language has this idea behind it of truthfulness or faithfulness. So Jonah here is a prophet and his name is Dove, the son of faithfulness. And what we're going to find out is that is kind of the opposite of Jonah's character. He's not super faithful, he's not super truthful, but he's a prophet. He's Dove, the son of faithfulness. So what's happening here in this story is that Jonah, the prophet of God, the man who hears directly from God and is supposed to speak on God's behalf to all of the people, he is called by God to go somewhere and he does the exact opposite. God calls him to go somewhere where he does not want to go, to do something that he does not want to do, to say something that he does not want to say. But why? Why doesn't he want to go? Well, it's Nineveh. Nineveh is the worst, all right? Nineveh is the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and the Assyrians are the enemies of Jonah's people. And in history, the Assyrians, the Ninevites, were known to be violent, cruel, evil people. So these are the bad guys. This is like me looking at you as a youth student and saying, hey, pick up your little Bible, hop on a plane, go to Las Vegas, walk up into the biggest casino there and tell them all to repent of their sin and praise be the Lord, give a big old sermon. That's scary. You would probably not do that, right? That's a scary thing. So why doesn't Jonah want to go? Well, first off, this is scary. Like legit, Jonah in his head is probably thinking that he might die. That God is possibly sending him on a mission that he might not make it back from. These are violent, evil, cruel people, and he might be scared. And, it's easy for us to make fun of the book of Jonah, make fun of this character, like Dove, the son of faithfulness, like the prophet of God, not listening to God. Like, it's funny. But at the same time, if we admit it, like, it's difficult for a lot of us to walk to the other side of the room and tell somebody about Jesus. Jonah might be scared here. But there's another thing that might be happening. Jonah is being called to go somewhere he does not want to go, to do something he does not want to do, to say something he does not want to say. And the reason might be because he just hates the Ninevites. He hates them. They're his enemy. We're going to see later on in chapter 4 where Jonah's kind of expressing to this God, like, God, why would you forgive them? Why would you even offer them this grace? Like, they are the worst. They don't deserve it. They are evil and cruel, and they are our enemies. Why would you do this? Jonah hates the Ninevites. You see, this mission to go and preach to Nineveh is going to require Jonah to face a piece of God that he does not want to face. To admit that there is a piece of God that he does not want to be true. To face a piece of God that he wishes did not exist. Because Jonah knows if God is sending him out there to go and preach and tell the Ninevites to repent and turn to God, that there is the slightest chance that they might actually listen. And if there's a slightest chance that they might actually listen, then maybe there's a slight chance that God will actually show them grace, that he will actually show them mercy, that he will actually show them forgiveness. And Jonah doesn't want any part of that. And you see, Jonah is stuck in the same mindset that many of us have, where we think that God is only going to save the good people, or God is only going to save the people that we think deserve it. But what Jonah is going to have to come face to face with is the truth, that God is far more merciful, that God is far more gracious, that God is far more forgiving than each and every one of us could possibly imagine. So we pick it up in verse 4. It says this, "But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God. And they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came and said to him, 'What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps this God will give a thought to us that we may not perish.'" Have you guys ever been inside of a crazy storm? I used to work at this camp every single summer, and it used to have the craziest storms, like the craziest lightning and thunder and wind, and like trees are like falling down, all this stuff. And there's one summer where the storm was absolutely ridiculous. It's like dumping rain, there's all this wind and lightning, and we hear on these radios that one of the boats is like sinking. So we like run down to the beach, like me and a bunch of guys, and we get there and there's like a lifeguard and these two girls inside of like this speedboat, and it's like slamming up against the dock over and over again. And they're in there with these little buckets, like trying to bail out the water wherever. It's like this crazy storm. It's like one of the craziest things I've ever seen. So this is kind of where they're at. Like, it's way worse. This is like a divine storm. It's crazy face. Like, all this stuff's going on, and they're just on this boat, like throwing stuff out of there, like trying to survive. And they're praying to all sorts of different gods. There's a God for the water, and a God for the sky, and a God for like cake or like whatever. There's gods for everything. And they're praying to all of them, trying to figure out which God is angry at them. Now, you might think that this is like pretty aggressive. Like, God, you're being a savage here, like storming up on these people and doing all this stuff. But we need to remember that God is he's on a mission to get Jonah to go to Nineveh. He is on a mission to rescue lost people. And so we need to think of this storm as kind of like a parent chasing after their little kid in order to like protect them from destruction around them. God is like chasing after Jonah in this moment. I remember when I was first learning to ride a bike, there's this hill at my house, and I used to get pushed down it and ride it. And my dad would run beside my bike, holding onto the back of my shirt. So if I ever fell, he would grab me and keep me safe. He was chasing after me like a parent. He was making sure I didn't destroy myself, because I'm kind of a gong show, like crashing into trees and like scraping my face on stuff or whatever. This is God chasing after Jonah, and he's using this storm to get Jonah back on track. So the sailors in this moment on the boat, these pagans, these guys that do not believe in Israel's God, in the God of the universe, what are they doing in this moment? They are frantically running around and they are praying. They're like crying out to God. They're trying to figure this out, like which God is mad at us. And what is Jonah doing? At the exact same time, Jonah, the prophet, the dove of faithfulness, is down in the inner parts of the ship, just taking a big old snooze. He's just having a nap. He's totally ignoring the situation around him. And Jonah is not innocent here, right? Like, he's living in sin. He's rebelling against God. He's running away from God. He's turned away, like he's going in the wrong direction. But why did Jonah run? Remember, Jonah hates the Ninevites. He hates them. But what's underneath that is that Jonah thinks he knows better than God. God is telling him to go and do this thing, and Jonah doesn't think that's right. He thinks he knows better than God. And I think we do this all the time, right? We hear some bad news. Life just isn't going the way that we expected it. Like maybe you break up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and you just, what's your response? You look to God and you say, God, what are you doing? You made the wrong choice. This isn't my happiness. Like, this isn't good for me. Like, you made the wrong choice. We think that we know better than God all the time. But you see, Jonah is coming face to face with the mystery of God's mercy, the mystery of God's grace. And Jonah is going to have to come to this point where he's going to have to admit the realness of his own sin. And he's going to have to admit that he is living and surviving wholly on the fact that God is a gracious God, that God is merciful to him. And until he gets to that moment, he's going to be blinded to the people around him. His personal faith is going to be no good to the people outside. And then we get this funny scene, right, at the end of here, where the captain runs down the ship and he's like, wake up, you sleeper. He's waking up Jonah and he's like, wake up and pray to your God. Like, what are you doing? And this is super ironic. This pagan sailor, this guy that does not believe in the same God as Jonah, is now telling Jonah to pray to this God. It's funny because the whole point of this is that God is sending Jonah to go and tell non-believers about himself. And the ironic thing is that the non-believers are now pointing Jonah back to God. It's hilarious. It's ironic. It's crazy. So at this point in the story, like, nothing is going right. Like, they can't figure this out. They're praying to all sorts of different gods, trying to figure out which one is angry and who they're angry at. They're telling this like lazy prophet to start praying to his God. So nothing's working. So they decide to cast lots, which is like this ancient form of like dice rolling where they can discern the will of the gods or whatever. So they cast this lot and it lands on Jonah. So now they know that whatever God it is mad at Jonah. His God is mad at him. So they want to figure it out. So they're asking him all sorts of questions like, who are you? Where are you from? Like, what type of job do you have? Or whatever. Jonah's like, I don't know, like, I work at GameStop, or I'm a barista, or whatever. No. Verses 9 and 10. And he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, what is this that you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. Now, here's what the sailors are thinking in this moment. Jonah, you were running away from your God. This God that you say is all powerful over the land and the sea, and you decided to run away from him on our boat? Are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? Have you gone mad? They are terrified in this moment. Like, Jonah's God controls the sea, and now Jonah's on a boat, their boat with them, and this is terrifying. And Jonah goes on to say that he fears God. And this is like a sense of reverence or awe or worship or wonder. Like, he has a fear of God. And these sailors look at him. No, you don't. Anyone that believes in this type of God and runs away from him definitely does not fear this God. You don't fear God, Jonah. Jonah says he fears God, but his words and his actions, they contradict one another. His words and his actions, they do not line up. This is religious hypocrisy. And I can't help it, but when I read this book, maybe you too, when I read the story of Jonah, I can't help thinking, Jonah, like, how did you get to this place? Like, why are you being so dumb? You are a man of God. You are a prophet. You speak on behalf of God. You hear from God. And God tells you to do something, and you just turn the other way and you do the exact opposite thing. Like, how did you get here? Everyone's on this boat praying out to all sorts of God, and you're a prophet, and you're downstairs having a snooze. You're napping. Like, how did you get here? What's going on? And then you're running away from God, but yet you still say you fear God. Like, this makes no sense. How could somebody get to this place? But as soon as you get to reading Jonah that way, as soon as you start reading this way, you've fallen into this book's trap. As soon as you start thinking that you are superior to Jonah, you have fallen into the trap, because this book is just holding up a mirror right at you and saying, don't you do the exact same thing? Do your words and your actions always line up perfectly? Are you not sometimes hypocritical? Do you really think that you are superior to Jonah? Because I would say, if I'm reading this, that there's a little bit of Jonah in me. I think there's a little bit of Jonah in you. There's probably a little bit of Jonah in all of us. Jonah does a very bad job of being a witness to God to other people. He does a very bad job of representing God to the people around him, to the sailors, to Ninevites, to whoever. But we need to ask the question, is God limited by what Jonah is doing? Is God limited in bringing people nearer or drawing people close to him by the way that Jonah is acting? No. No, he is not limited, and we're going to see that in the story. So what we have here is Jonah's just telling people, throw me overboard. Throw me into the water, like, kill me now, like, I don't really care anymore, just, like, get me out of here. And the sailors are doing everything possible, like, they're fighting so hard. They are the heroes of this story, essentially. They're rowing as hard as they can, they're throwing stuff overboard, and it's just not working. And this is what happens next, verse 14 onward. Therefore, they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood for you. O Lord, have done as it pleases you. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Now the sailors in the story begin to cry out. And who are they crying out to at this moment? At the beginning of the story, they're crying out to all sorts of different gods. The god of land, the god of sea, the god of boats, the god of whatever. But at this moment, they are crying out to the one true God. The God of Jonah, the God of the universe, the God of the Bible. And it's this amazing moment. And it's somewhat ironic because this is the first prayer in the entire book that goes out to the one true God. And who does it come from? It doesn't come from the man of God, Jonah, the prophet, the dove of faithfulness. It doesn't come from him. It comes from these pagan sailors, these unbelievers. And then there's this amazing moment in verse 16 where it says, Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly. They fear God. Who in this book only says that they fear God? Jonah, he says it. Who actually fears God? These men. They see his power. They see the amazing things happening around them, and they actually fear God. And it says that they offered sacrifice to the Lord and they made vows. They devoted themselves to God. They gave him sacrifice and they're worshiping him. They're doing all these things. So was God limited by the witness of Jonah? Was God limited by the work of his people in this situation? No. God does what God wants to do. He wanted to reach these people and he did. And here's the sad part of the story, is that Jonah is so focused on himself. He's so focused on thinking that he has the right way and God doesn't, that he misses it. He misses this moment where these guys are crying out to God and they're praying and they're doing all these things. He misses the moment to actually witness to them. He misses the moment where God is actually working in their lives because he's so focused on himself. Jonah says that he's a man of God. Jonah says that he fears God. But in the end, there is a contradiction between what he says and how he lives. There's a big contradiction there. Religious hypocrisy. And this is true for Christians today. Religious hypocrisy is around all the time. We have Christians who say the right things. They go to youth group. They say the right things. They go on Sunday and they say the right things. On their Instagram, they say the right things. But in their everyday life, they are just living for themselves. Whatever pleases them, they do it. They do whatever they want on the weekends or whatever they want on their laptops or on their phones. And they talk however they want. And they act however they want. But then on Sunday or Tuesday at youth, when it counts, then we say all the right things again. Our words and our actions, they don't line up. And then what happens for Jonah? Very end of this chapter, God sends a great fish to swallow up Jonah. But don't miss this moment here. Don't miss the imagery here. Jonah can't get any further down. He can't get any lower in his life. Listen, God causes him to arise and to go out to Nineveh. But Jonah went down to Joppa. Jonah went down into the boat. Jonah went down into the inner parts of the boat. Jonah went down into sleep. And Jonah went down into the sea as he is swallowed up by this big fish. Now, if we're going to end the story right here, you would think this is it. That's the end, dead. Jonah keeps going down, down, down. His life can't get any worse to the point where he's out of this boat and God swallows him up with this instrument of death, with this giant fish, and it brings him down. He's at the lowest part of himself and it can't get any worse. It's death. And at this moment of death comes new life. God somehow uses this instrument of death instead as an instrument of grace. And he keeps Jonah alive and he gives him a second chance, a new life. God shows him mercy through this giant fish. And this is the gospel. Don't miss this here. Matthew chapter 12, Jesus is being talked to by the religious people, by the Pharisees, and they keep saying to Jesus, give us a sign. Give us a sign of who you are. And he says, I will give you no sign except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So in this moment where someone can't get any lower in sin, in rebellion, he's at the bottom of the bottom. Jonah is at this near-death experience. And what we're going to see as we move on through this series is that this near-death experience brings about new life. It brings about a second chance. And Jesus is saying that is exactly what I am going to do. Jesus goes on the cross, this instrument of death, and he takes this instrument of death and he turns it all upside down. He turns it into an instrument of life. And God uses Jesus on the cross to defeat sin and death and to conquer over evil. And he turns this instrument of death into an instrument of life, into an instrument of a second chance. And for Jonah, what we need to understand is that Jonah did nothing to deserve this. Jonah here, we could say, is living on borrowed time. Like, he's supposed to be dead. He is living fully in grace and grace alone, and he did nothing to deserve it. And some of you might be able to resonate with that. Maybe you feel like you are at the bottom of yourself, like things just can't get any lower. And this is good news for you because it says it's not too late. It's good news because there's grace for you too. Jonah did nothing to earn this. Jonah did nothing to deserve this. This thing happened to him. God's grace happened to him, and it can happen to you as well. But when we're at the bottom, there's still a chance. For those people in your lives that you think are at the bottom, there's still a chance. Because the grace of God is much bigger than this, and the grace of God is given to the most unlikeliest of people. So I'm praying for you guys as you have this discussion, and we will see you guys for Jonah chapter 2 next week.